Good afternoon, colleagues. Thank you for tuning in today as we discuss driver distraction, looking specifically at unravelling distraction in the policy environment. Today's webinar is based on a rather thought-provoking paper which is due to be featured in the 4th International Conference on Driver Distraction and Inattention, scheduled next month in Sydney, Australia. Some of you may be aware that today's session was originally also to include a second presentation, which we are unfortunately no longer able to cover. We do hope to reschedule that one for another time, and apologies for any inconvenience caused. My name is Angela Juhas, and I will be your friendly moderator today. I run the online training program here at ARB Group. And if you do have any technical related concerns, those are my details. Please feel free to send those through to me. Joining the webinar team today as a guest interviewer, we have Professor Michael Regan, who otherwise holds the title of Chief Scientist here at ARB Group. Mike joined ARB just this year actually, but his career spans some 20 years as a transport safety specialist, as a researcher, a research manager, and policymaker. Welcome, Mike. Lovely to have you on board. In terms of housekeeping, we are recording today's session, and a copy of the recording, together with the presentation material, will be available to you once the session has concluded. Webinars work best when they are interactive, and so please don't be shy. Get involved. Type through your questions and comments into the questions box, which you'll see there in your control panel. Now, before I hand over to our special guest presenters, I would like to warmly and formally introduce them. Joining us via correspondence today, we have Nolani Reardon and Hannah Parnell, both of whom represent the Centre for Road Safety Transport for New South Wales. Nolani is Acting Principal Policy Officer in the Road Safety Policy Team and has over 11 years' experience in road safety-related programs and policy. Nolani's role includes the development and delivery of strategic road safety policies and projects. Welcome, Nolani. We also have Hannah joining us. Now, Hannah is a Senior Research and Policy Analyst in the Safer People team, part of the Safe Systems area. She has over 10 years research experience within the public and private sector, including 4 years road safety experience in her current role. Hannah's role focuses on research and behaviour change, and her specialist areas include driver distraction, drink driving, driver fatigue, speeding, and young drive safety. Without further ado, welcome Nolani and Hannah to the webinar. Thank you so much for joining us today, and we very much look forward to hearing more about your presentation. Thank you.
Thanks, Angela. So, in New South Wales, we're currently developing a draft road user distraction action plan. But as policymakers, initially we need to sit back and we need to identify why is distraction on the government policy agenda. We need to ask ourselves some really critical questions. What has triggered the need for a review? What is triggering the need for change? What evidence is there that a problem actually exists? What is the data telling us? What is the research telling us? Are there external drivers to needing change? For example, advancing technology? Does distraction affect all road users? In a nutshell, why are we here? Why have we found ourselves in a position where we need to develop a policy framework and initiatives to support that framework?
Okay, so thinking about the evidence we've got to support change, what is the context now, and what is the current setting of road user distraction in New South Wales? So we need to think, what is distraction? Is road user distraction a road safety issue? How big an issue is it? Does road user distraction increase crash risk? Is that for all road users or just some? And what are the key sources of distraction inside the vehicle and in the road environment as well? And thinking about it from a safe systems approach. So safe roads, safe vehicles, safe road users. Thinking about each pillar and what distraction issues are there for each. Thinking about the road safety objectives, if we want to address the issue of distraction, what are the key road safety objectives that need to be achieved by the policy development? Are we trying to change community attitudes? We need to know what they are if we know whether we need to change them or not. Are we trying to reduce destructive behaviours? Are they resulting in crashes? Are we looking to reduce distraction-related road trauma, so fatalities, casualties, serious injuries, across all road users? What are we trying to achieve here? Or is it one of those, a few of those, or all of those?
And then once we have identified and identify our road safety objectives, what are our key policy objectives that are required to assist in achieving those road safety objectives? So do we really understand the complexities of road user distraction on our roads? We drive in a very complex environment, both within the vehicle and external to the vehicle. As Hannah mentioned earlier, we need to apply the safe system approach to road safety. What is distracting in the road environment? What is distracting in vehicles? What level of distraction is acceptable both inside and outside the vehicle? We need to look at these key areas to identify our policy objectives. Is our regulatory framework appropriate and adequate? These are all questions that we need to answer to be able to set our policy objectives to reach our road safety goals.
To develop policy, we need to do lots of research. So what are the key areas that require research and analysis that inform our policy development? We need to make sure we're asking all the right questions. What are the road user distraction problems we're trying to address? And we need to approach it in terms of a safe system. So looking at the road, what do we know here? There's lots of advertising out there. Is there too much clutter? What do we know in terms of in-vehicle distraction? There's lots of in-vehicle technology brought in and inbuilt. Is some distracting? Some technologies prevent distraction. What do we know from a road user perspective in terms of drivers, riders? What distractions are at play there, and how the drivers and riders react to those? What about vulnerable road users such as pedestrians and cyclists? How does distraction affect their use of the road, and how do we need to address some of these? And also looking at what others are doing. Are some of other jurisdictions in Australia, how are they addressing distraction? Are some of the distraction issues common to those jurisdictions? Are there proven best practice nationally and internationally in terms of distraction that will help inform our policy development? Can we look at those? Can we build on those? How do we weigh up the road safety risks? Are some distractions okay? Are some not okay? And what are the limitations in the data? And how do we overcome these and work around them? We know that crash data is limited in this area and offence data. What do we take from that? What do we need to find out more about? And how do we overcome those data limitations? We need to pull all this research together to develop a clear policy and action plan to address the issue of distraction based on sound evidence.
So in New South Wales, we have progressed through what we have described briefly to you, and we have consulted internally on a number of occasions with a lot of meetings and ongoing consultation with subject matter experts to inform our policy development. So we are now at the stage of drafting our road user distraction plan in an effort to achieve the road safety and policy outcomes that were identified earlier in our process. So at the conference, we won't be actually discussing the outcomes of what's in the action plan because that is still very much in an internal draft form. However, we will certainly be talking about more about the how. What more have we done to unravel, to get to the point of being able to make some policy decisions enough to look at initiatives to achieve those. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you, ladies, for touching on the key aspects of your paper. And I'll hand over now to Mike, as I believe he has some questions for you. Thank you, Mike.
Oh, thanks, Angela. Yes, I just had I have 3 questions. I might go through them each in turn. The first one is that you talked about a regulatory framework during the presentation, and I was just wondering what work you're actually doing on that at the moment, and how you're planning to overcome current issues with regulation and enforcement of distraction.
Sure. With this Nolani here, I'll answer that one. So in New South Wales, we have the New South Wales road rules, and they are based on the model law of the Australian road rules. And all states and territories across Australia base their local road rules on that model law. We have a maintenance group, an Australian Road Rules Maintenance Advisory Group that works with the National Transport Commission to develop and amend the rules, to keep them current, and to make further enhancements for safety, traffic management, etc. as required. So as a separate project and for the maintenance group, and also separate to the development of the policy and distraction plan for New South Wales, New South Wales is facilitating workshops to review the current distraction road rules. So specifically in relation to in-vehicle technology, and that can be brought into the vehicle. We're looking at a whole range of issues, as I said, associated with in-vehicle technology while driving. So as I'm sure everyone here listening is aware, technology has really raced ahead of us and will continue to do so, and we really need to be able to future-proof our regulation as much as possible, and to ensure that we have a legal framework that has road safety at the forefront, and that we're not constantly being overtaken by the rapid pace of technology. So we have facilitated workshops, and each jurisdiction members are working towards certain research and data collection for us to come back together shortly again, and to inform policy positions that the group will come to that will then need to be put forward to the National Transport Commission as far as drafting any changes to the road rules. But we're doing a really intensive look at everything. We are probably not leaving too many stones unturned in the research that we are doing, so that we can really get the best road safety outcomes, and as I mentioned earlier, that are really informed by solid evidence. So, but having said all of that, I think we shouldn't lose sight of the fact that regulation is not always the answer. Obviously, for certain things like mobile phone use, visual display unit use, GPS, etc., where we have significant interactions with the device, regulation certainly has a purpose. But a lot can also be achieved through education. Thanks.
Thanks, Nolani. I've got a couple more questions. I'm not sure who to direct the next one to, but there's quite a lot of emerging and converging research that shows that different sources of distraction carry different levels of crash risk and risk of safety critical events. I'm just wondering, when developing your policies in this area, are you taking into account the different levels of risk of different distractions and the accumulating body of research that you can draw on in doing that?
Hi, Mike. Yeah, it's Hannah here. Yes, it's the short answer, but we are looking at all the available research and taking that into account, and looking at some risks perhaps may be acceptable and some risks may not, and just managing that risk We do base it on a lot of the evidence that's out there, some of which comes from you, Mike, so thank you, and a lot of the naturalistic driving studies that have happened in the US. We need to consider, are some risks acceptable? For example, advertising billboard might be considered acceptable in a location where the cognitive load is quite small, such as a long straight road in an area where there's not much else going on. But the same billboard with the same ad may not be acceptable in a location where the cognitive load is high, such as at a busy intersection that already has traffic signals because it's a complex environment and it has high pedestrian activity. So it's already a very complex environment, and that's where we might say, no, it's not acceptable in that location. It's too much of a distraction from what the driver should be considering. And I think it's about getting this fine balance between managing the level of risk and also thinking about, or not restricting people too much and giving them some freedom. For example, with mobile phone use, we legislate against handheld use, but for T2, in New South Wales and T2 and unrestricted drivers, we allow hands-free for calling. Also things like kids in the back seat, eating, drinking, using the radio. We know that there is a level of risk there, but some are perhaps less acceptable than others. And again, maybe regulation isn't the answer there. It's more about education. We want to give people the freedom to eat and drink while they're driving, but we want people to know that there is a level of risk, and we just need to educate in that sense. So we really are looking at all these types of different distractions that happen. What is the evidence there? What is the risk? And then making a call of how we address those based on that and our policy hats as well, I guess.
Yeah, thanks, Anna. It's not easy to get that that balance right, for sure. It's easy to be a researcher, I think.
Totally.
I had just one more question, and then I should let some other people in the audience ask some questions. But the final one was, you're talking about future policy here, or have been during this presentation. I'm just wondering what countermeasures and initiatives you have on the boil at the moment to help reduce the distraction. So what are you doing at the moment to manage distraction here in New South Wales?
Okay, well, there's a bunch of things which I think we'll both touch on. I guess in terms of the education side of things, one of the key things we use currently is public education campaigns. And we've got in New South Wales, we've got our Get Your Hand Off It campaign. I don't know if anyone out there has seen it. It was originally launched in 2003, had more of a humorous message to raise awareness. We've recently, just in the last couple of weeks, in fact, revised the Get Your Hand Off It campaign with a more serious message about the dangers of taking your eyes off the road to hold and use a mobile phone. So actually, thank you, Queensland, if anyone from Queensland is on the line. We did take that ad from the Queensland Department of Transport and Main Roads. And we just needed to make that shift. Now that awareness has been raised of the issue, we wanted to make the shift to make sure, to highlight to drivers the dangers of doing so. And it also ties in with the research that we've found around the increased crash risk from taking your eyes off the road to greater than 2 seconds. That come from the naturalistic driving studies. And while we do focus on mobile phone use in the ad, it does kind of broaden the issue of distraction to just taking your eyes off the road, not just mobile phone use. So our key focus at the moment is mobile phones, but that's the future, I guess.
There's more. So we work very closely here at the Centre for Road Safety in Sydney with the New South Wales Police, and they are certainly out there enhancing enforcement particularly for mobile phone offences. Interestingly, in New South Wales last year we had approximately 35,000 offences issued for illegal use of mobile phones. We also have some more general things to do with road rules that include the use of mobile phones or illegal use of mobile phones. So each year I think it's the first week in February, each year we have Road Rules Awareness Week. And we really do endeavour to get out and the messages out into community, and particularly about those road rules that people often have trouble misunderstanding. We have a publication called The Top 10 Misunderstood Road Rules, and possibly as no surprise, mobile phones does feature in the top 10. That brochure is available across the state in all the Service New South Wales registries and also online. But to complement that, we also have some really useful animations that are on the New South Wales Road Safety website, and explaining those misunderstood road rules. And the mobile phone one really does clearly explain how to legally use your phone when you're driving. So there's some of the initiatives that we have in place. Obviously, that is coupled with the work that we are doing at the Australian Road Rules Maintenance Advisory Group level, so at the national level with other jurisdictions. Our Safer Vehicles team and Safer Roads teams are also working on a number of other projects to help reduce the level of distraction in their particular areas, so in vehicle and roads. And some of those clearly will feed into our action plan.
Okay, well, thanks for that. There's a fair bit going on. So I think at this stage I'll hand over to Angela again to let us know if there are any questions from the audience.
Yes.
Thanks, Angela.
Thank you, Mike, and thank you so much, Nolani and Hannah, for that really interesting presentation. I'm actually really curious to know what else features among those top 10 misunderstood road rules, so I might have a little squiz at that document later. And to our audience out there, please don't worry about having to scribble down those web links there. This will all be sent to you once the webinar has concluded, for you to have a look at it at your own leisure. Now, I have had a question here from Essie, and Essie's from Western Australia. The question is, are you using existing research and conducting new research? Is the research being conducted in just New South Wales, or is it done so nationally?
Okay, Hannah here. I'll answer that one. Yes, we are using existing research, and I guess we have done our own as well. It's now existing, I guess, because we've done some of it. I think we probably will end up doing some more as part of our action plan, but I won't go into that in too much detail. I think in terms of what we're using now, we're looking at a lot of the naturalistic driving studies in the US, reading a few of Mike Reed's books as well, and looking at all that evidence. Plus, we've also got some attitudinal research that we've done here in New South Wales, trying to understand more of the attitudes around distractions, as well as just looking at the crash risk side of things, and the more the other side of things as well. And there was another part to that question, and I've forgotten the other part of it.
So the question was, in relation to where the studies were being conducted in New South Wales or nationally, and whether it was existent or not. So I think.
Well, so a lot of it is I guess, international research that we've used. Some stuff, we've done in New South Wales ourselves, and we're actually working with UNSW at the moment on our own naturalistic driving study here in Australia. So that's a really exciting thing that we're working with in New South Wales, but it's being done by New South Wales Uni. But I assume that will become available, more broadly once that's complete. But that's a really exciting project to be done here in Australia. While, as far as I know, all the previous ones are American. And we're also with the work with the Australian Road Rules Maintenance Advisory Group. There is some research that we're doing in there, and we're combining sources, I guess, across jurisdictions, so looking at what each other has done in terms of distraction and learning from each other as well. So, it's not just New South Wales research, it is kind of broader nationally and internationally.
Great, thank you so much for that, and thank you, Essie, for sending that question through. I do have another question here from Paul, and I'll just take this opportunity to remind our wonderful audience that the webinar will be open for a few more minutes at least, so if you do have any last minute questions you'd like to type through, I welcome you to please do so now. Thank you. So the question from Paul reads, and it's a bit of a long one, so please bear with me. Emerging research recently presented at the Australasian Road Safety Conference 2015 shows that lower cognitive loads lead to increase in inattentional blindness. Also, optimum cognitive loads appear to be idiosyncratic, with technology decreasing cognitive loads of drivers and the appropriate cognitive load being dependent on the individual. Is regulation for distraction going to be a suitable tool in the future, or should other approaches be considered?
Well, I would say that both. As far as from a regulatory perspective and working at that national level in the group that we have previously discussed, we are still at the evidence gathering stage. We are not making any policy decisions just yet. So we will have to look at what the evidence is telling us, how we deal with that evidence within a regulatory framework, because we definitely obviously need to have a regulatory framework that prescribes the type of use of these devices, which of course we already have, but we recognise that technology is sort of leaping ahead. And so we won't be making those decisions just yet until the group gets back together. So I would say, though, that with any of these things, that there is certainly regulation required, but that there are always other ways to go for certain aspects, and whether that is education or other.
For example, it may be that technology ends up helping us through things like workload managers and things like that, rather than it can maybe help to prevent distraction rather than be a distraction. But that's just something that we, looking into and researching at the moment, I guess.
Yeah, that's right. And as Hannah said, there are many things that countermeasures, and even in vehicles, tactile things inside vehicles now, as well as tactiles on the road. So some of the things, say like roadside tactiles, which we traditionally think of to fatigue, obviously also work there very well for distracted drivers.
Great, thank you. And thank you, Paul, for your question. Now, I've got another one here from Karen, and Karen's asking, in relation to the action plan, when it's eventually finalised, will it then be available for everyone to have a read of?
That's a good question. I'm not sure at this stage. I'd have to take that on notice and let you know, I think.
Absolutely.
Normally, what I can say to you is that normally all our action plans are published and put on our website for public viewing, but haven't had that discussion yet about this particular action plan, so I don't feel that I'm probably the right person to tell you that, but happy to take it on notice and let you know.
Absolutely. Well, Karen, the presenter's details are featured in the presentation, which will be resent out to all of you on email after we've finished up today. And if you'd like to follow up with Hannah or Nolani at some stage to discuss that further, I'm sure the ladies would be most happy for you to do that. Another question here from Steve. So Steve is saying, I'm working on the use of eye tracking to educate the importance of observation. Do you have any projects that are working with eye tracking technology?
I'm not aware of any, to be honest, at the moment that we're doing. Unfortunately not. I think it would be really interesting. I've seen some research around when you're distracted by, for example, a mobile phone, your field of vision gets dramatically reduced, and that's your peripheral vision. You don't see a lot of the hazards when you're focused on something else rather than the driving task. So I think that would be really interesting to to know. And would we be able to have a copy of the research?
Absolutely. Well, Steve, please do drop us a line. We'd love to know more. Okay. Well, at the moment, that's what we have from our lovely audience. If anyone does have anything else they'd like to say, you please type that into your questions box. I will at this time ask our presenters to just flick it to the next slide, which I believe has some further information about their details. There you go. If anyone would like to touch base and discuss the paper with the presenters in a little bit more detail, the details are there on your screen at the moment. And I think it's then the next one. He's hoping I haven't mucked that up. Yeah, so Mike, I might actually hand it over to yourself to talk a little bit about the Driver Distraction and Inattention conferences. I believe you've had quite a pivotal role in bringing it all together. So I'll hand over to you, Mike.
Oh, thanks very much, Angela. And thanks to Helen Nolani. It was a very informative discussion. Yeah, this conference I created actually with a guy from Volvo called Dr. Trent Victor back in 2009. So this is the fourth conference in the series. We've conducted it before in Gothenburg, Sweden, and so this is the first time that it's come to Australia. And it's now the only international conference on these topics. We normally get about 150 delegates in Europe. I think at the moment we're looking at getting at least 120 for this one, which is very encouraging here in Sydney. We've got probably around 50 or so papers and non-paper presentations over a 3-day period. And at least half of those are from the international community. So it's really good actually that half of them are from here in Australia and in the Southern Hemisphere on some quite interesting topics. We also have a couple of technical tours. One's at the University of New South Wales. They've got, together with Sydney University, in the Research Centre for Integrated Transport Innovation, 10 simulators that are what we call networked, and so it's possible for 10 different people to sit in 10 different simulators and drive through the same virtual environment. And there's also a cycling simulator there too, so we can look at interactions between drivers and cyclists. And so when you're doing distraction research, it's really quite interesting to have a more realistic virtual environment like that, where you've got people interacting with each other. And also the Centre for Field Robotics, because one of the special sessions we have at the conference will be on driver distraction and automated vehicles. And that's quite an interesting area, because at the moment automated vehicles aren't quite at the stage where they can completely drive themselves in all situations. And so one of the things that vehicle manufacturers are trying to come to grips with is the fact that for these semi-autonomous vehicles, when they can't continue to drive automatically for some reason, for example, if they fail or they reach their limits of competence, drivers will have to take over again. And so one of the big issues for vehicle manufacturers is whether or not people are going to be competent enough to be able to do that and to develop situational awareness very quickly of what's happening and what they have to do to take control. And so if people are distracted or inattentive, that's an issue that will make it more difficult for them to be able to take back control. So we'll be having a discussion about that. We'll be having a discussion about how you can support, how you can know, for example, whether people are distracted. If you know that people are distracted in the car when they've got to take over, what are the mitigating strategies you can use to help them take over control? And we want to know a bit more about, what kinds of distracting activities people might engage in when they are in autonomous vehicles. So quite a bit going on in that area, and it ties in very well with another initiative that ARRV is leading, called the Australian Driverless Vehicle Initiative. and there's another conference actually the week just before this distraction conference in Adelaide, where we've got quite a range of local and international speakers talking about autonomous vehicles and the future of vehicle autonomy in transport. So there's not much else to say about the conference. We do have a special session on distraction and public policy. Now, Lani and Hannah will be featuring as panellists in that special session, along with some other local and international experts, and that will be a broader discussion than the one we've had today. We also have another special session on what we call driver headspace, and so that's situations in which ambulance drivers, emergency service drivers, and just ordinary other drivers are driving for work purposes but are exposed to traumatic events that reduce their so-called headspace, which makes it difficult for them to continue to drive safely. And so what we want to do is to assemble a bunch of people to talk about that and to talk about cognitive distraction as perhaps one of the mechanisms of reduced headspace. So apart from that and three interesting keynote speakers that we've got coming out, that just about sums it up, I think. Thank you, Angela, for the time to talk about the conference, and I hope that many people can come, and I see that if people who've subscribed to this webinar come, they get a $250 discount on the registration. So
they do.
Bonus
they do, Mike.
involved.
Thank you so much for... Yeah, absolutely. I was just about to jump in there and let everyone know. And I wasn't aware that you're the founder of this conference. That's rather exciting and a huge achievement. That's really exciting. For those of you who are interested in coming along to the conference or are learning more, hearing Nolani and Hannah live and perhaps meeting them and also Mike and other industry experts, please feel free to come along to the conference. We've got some details there on the screen, as Mike pointed out, and quite a significant discount for all of you here today. I will take this opportunity just to also mention we've had... Karen sent through a comment, and that was in relation to Steve's earlier question. So thank you guys both for your involvement. And the comment there is, one of the presentations at the Road Safety Conference 2015 last week was one of the studies used eye tracking devices to measure drivers' reaction to static and digital billboards. So there you go, Steve. Some information for you to follow up as well. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today, taking the time out of your busy days to learn a little bit more about driver distraction and policy. I thank Hannah and Nolani for their time to put today's presentation together and for delivering it. I look forward to meeting you ladies at the conference, and thank you also, Mike, for your role in putting together this webinar. Thank you all, and enjoy the rest of your afternoon. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye. Thanks very much. Bye.